Hello everybody, Glitch Reaper here. I'm back with some more Magic Duels, and I'm getting pretty convinced that whenever I hear the music through my headset, it's amplified a bit. So I don't think that's really going to come out as much on the video as I first thought. So yeah, that's kind of whenever uh, you're just learning how the different recording programs interact and stuff like that, and with Steam and its own thing. So that happens. Anyhow, I was wanting to go over some very particular abilities, some of the blocks, and I'm going to look through and make sure that it also has some other ones I was thinking of doing. So there's one that's also another kind of a whole class of abilities type ability, I guess you could say, kind of like when before I was showing about Rally. So that's kind of a thing to think about in the future, but yeah. Okay, so I don't see the other one I was thinking of, so I mean it's kind of like Revolt. It's called Rally, so it's kind of based on having something previously there. But although I can kind of go over something kind of like that here, and I'm definitely going to do that actually because there is something I was wanting to do specifically, and let me see here. There was something else. Never mind. Anyhow, I'm going to go over kind of a special subset of abilities that you'll be seeing a lot of whenever you're at the Innistrad block. Well, actually, it's more like the second Innistrad block, really, because previously they have had those released, but you don't have the earlier sets in here. You mainly have Shadows over Innistrad and Eldritch Moon. And they have a very particular set of abilities that's kind of based on the dark horror theme, or cosmic horror theme, unleashed by the invasion of the Eldrazi, which is a pretty big part of that story. So I'm going to go over some of those things you could do. And one of these abilities, at least, is kind of something that's been around for a while, but kind of has more of a theme going there. So whenever I go over that, it should be pretty apparent where that's going. I'm going to go with that one first. Transform. Basically, when a card transforms, it gets flipped over. There's been different iterations of this, actually, and they finally settled on having a two-faced card you literally just flip around. There was one literally that had like divided. There was some previously had like a divide in the center, and you literally like rotated the card around, but still had one backing. So that was something that they had physically worked on before, and now they have it set where you literally flip over which side of the card is face up, and that's kind of. I think they kind of eventually settled on that because of something also having to do with the physical cards, that a lot of people have them sleeved where the back of it isn't shown. So in that case, somebody would take it out of the sleeve and put it back in with the other face up. So that way, if your opponent is seeing the backs of your cards, they'd only see that if you weren't using sleeves. Like, they'd know what was coming up if you weren't using sleeves. But since most players do use sleeves on their physical cards, that's kind of how that was kind of settled on as well. Most people have them sleeved anyhow, partially to preserve them, and partially so that, well, mainly to keep the card safe and everything. And the thing is, when they settle on that, there's also something about the more modern version where you also have a lot of online play, kind of like with this game with Magic Duels. And you don't actually see the backings of cards whenever you've got an electronic format where you're doing it online, because it'll show the back of the card like a normal backing instead, even if it would transform and flip. But so basically, I have it where it literally like looks like it's becoming another card. Like, even if you're have your hand out in your online, they won't be seeing an actual like other side of the card. They'll only be seeing what it normally shows as a backing for your deck. So that's kind of a thing that it's special with online play. And of course, if it's on the field, then the other side's already down and the main side is up. Now, the thing is, some cards can transform back and forth based on various things, and some cards, once they transform, they stay transformed. So that's another thing about this. And they kind of have renamed some of these abilities over time, and transform is what they kind of settled on for this kind of transformation where the card itself powers up and becomes this alternate form after being flipped, where the other side is now face up. So the thing is that there's some additional rules I might want to go over before I get into this actual skill quest. Whenever any of these cards is sent to the graveyard or exile or wherever else, then they will always count as having their original face-up side face up as to what that means. So if it was a creature that was face up originally and that transforms into something else, it still counts as a creature in your graveyard if it's defeated. So, for example, there are some planeswalkers you can actually get by transformation. And if the planeswalker card is defeated and it goes to the graveyard, then it counts as the creature it originally was. And in those cases, all of them are legendary, so that's just kind of a thing of saying that's... Well, there's legendary rules. I'm not sure if it fully goes over them in here, but I'll look for that and make sure later. But anyhow, never mind that. Just the fact is that whatever it winds up being in terms of initially, as opposed to what it winds up being later on, is what you go by when it's anywhere other than on the field and transformed. So that's basically what I'm saying with that, is on the field is the only time where you have to worry about transform and figuring out which face is actually active. But let's go over and show how this shows this off. I think I got the volume set right. Again, this whole thing about it coming through my headset's a bit different. I think you can hear me over it because I have a distinctive voice tone. Oh, and here's another thing about it. Whenever it's a creature, if it transforms, it doesn't get summoning sickness again. It's basically counted as already under your control. Unless, of course, you can somehow transform it first turn. Then that's a different story, because basically that state is, as to whether or not it has summoning sickness or not, is maintained by the transformation. So if they didn't have it at the time, they won't have it suddenly, and vice versa. So this also makes cards with haste really, really special with transforming, because if a creature has haste, it doesn't have to care. So yeah. So that's just one more thing it mentioned here, so that's a good reminder. Okay, this is a survive this turn, win next turn situation. Yep. Oh, come on, I said, why is it not doing this? It's not doing the timer. Hello? Timer? Why are you not doing the timer? Okay, that was weird. Okay, this is basically how you can see both sides, so even before I reset, I might want to go over this. Basically, it'll always describe on the card how it transforms. Like this one's saying basically it has Defender, and that means it can't attack normally. It's saying it enters the battlefield with 4 ice counters on it, which means right now it has 2 of those by these symbols here. So you can see the little beads there. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery card, remove an ice counter from thing in the ice. Then if it has no darn lips again. Then if it has no ice counters on it, transform it. And this is Awoken Horror. When this creature transforms into Awoken Horror, return all non-horror creatures to their owner's hands. So that'll fling things away really fast. The thing is, I'm not going to be able to quite fully do this in the normal way because of what's happening here. I can't skip blocking because I'm trying to activate this, but for some odd reason it wouldn't let me stop the timer, which is very weird. Yeah, so that's not exactly normal. And wait a moment, how am I supposed to beat this? Because that's like 9 points of damage anyhow. Okay, I definitely need to reset this one because something was wrong with the thing. It wasn't registering the timer being stopped. So, sometimes these things do mess up that way, so sorry. That does happen. Come on, stop. Why are you not stopping? Timer. There you go. Finally. I was needing to stop the timer, but it wouldn't do it. Okay, that was weird. It hasn't done that to me before in these. That's bizarre. Okay, anyhow, Disperse allows you to throw a non-permanent, darn lips, a non-land permanent to its owner's hand immediately just by casting it. So that's what this card here is for. Disperse. As you get flung. So I am going to, say, fling this one here. I reduce the ice counters on it. I don't have anything else I can do, so I need to block anyhow. Now, this creature has enough toughness to survive in and of itself. They'll deal me about 6 points of damage to me, because they'll be the remaining damage. So when another creature you control dies, put a +1/+1 counter on unruly mob. So yeah, they get more and more unruly over time. But because I didn't technically kill the other creature, that means that this is going to... What else was in my graveyard? Okay, so it's assuming I'd whacked a couple other creatures before with some serious mana. But anyhow, because it didn't technically die, the others don't power up. So therefore, it's not going to be able to take this out, because it's not strong enough yet. But anyhow, let's go through the block. I'll be down to like 1 point of health. But this is about winning the next turn anyhow. And my opponent's turn's about to end. Another unruly mob. Okay, they have the stated maximum of 4 cards. The thing of Magic's Gathering is you have a limit of 4 of anything in your deck that's not a basic land. So that's kind of something to think of. If you see 4 of the same creature out on the field, unless they're like token copies or something, then that means that somebody's basically maxed out on those. Unless it says otherwise. There's a few very rare exceptions, but they specifically state it on the card. Anyhow, apparently I've got a new card. Divination allows me to draw 2 cards. So, yeah, that's always nice. 2 more cards. So, thank you. And whenever that transforms, because I cast a spell to counter it down, all those things have been sent away. Since it was already under my control, that means it's ready to go. And it's a 7/8 creature in and of itself, so that's gonna hurt, because that's actually pretty potent. A Kraken horror creature, just that's like 7/8, just ouch. I mean, that thing's painful. Anyhow, yeah, time to level you. So goodbye now. It was an arrow, but nice to see you go. Fancy attack. Swirly. Oh yeah, it's just a reminder about doing something I've been doing for a while. Zooming in on cards. It's basically just saying that you can zoom in on any double-faced card, like ones with transform, to be able to see both faces. So it's just an interesting reminder on that one. Already done it, but yeah. There's also another kind of effect in the Innistrad block, or again, second Innistrad block. I guess you could call it returned Innistrad. That's a very, very special note. There may be very few of these, but you never know when it could come up. And that's the Meld ability. Meld is special. It is kind of, I think, the thing is, the various trading card games have kind of inspired each other over time. Like, Magic the Gathering was the absolute first. But then, like, others came on, like Yu-Gi-Oh, aka Duel Monsters, and Pokemon card game, and some other card games and stuff like that. And the thing is, Meld is kind of inspired by fusions from Yu-Gi-Oh. And it's basically kind of illustrating that here, that you take a couple of other cards, usually creatures, and meld them together to form like one super creature. So it's kind of like that. And the thing is, there's only 3 specific pairings of that in all of Magic the Gathering right now. Like, that's it. There's only 3 possible fusions you'll ever see. Well, I won't say ever entirely. That would be bad to really throw ahead, because you never know. This feature might come up again. But because of the exact way in the story that things were happening, it kind of went with this set when it might not show up again. Because they like being things to be story appropriate as well as game appropriate. So this is one of those things where everything just converged together to literally converge things together. So, yeah. But the thing is, kind of like with Transform, the cards have to fulfill particular conditions. Usually at a certain point in your turn, the creatures have to both be under control by you. So in other words, on your part of the battlefield. And this is where things get crazy. So I'm just going to show this version right here. And there's several other rules with Meld, and you can kind of go into the abilities thing and kind of get the extra rules that way too, but I can kind of zoom in on one with Meld and show what it says about it. It was really weird about the button not working. I mean, seriously. If that happens during an actual match that I'm in, I'm just going to be a little upset about that. Another thing it's also saying is if melded card leaves the battlefield, it separates into 2 cards again. So that's kind of a thing that if it gets taken out, it'll kind of disperse. But not entirely. But I'm not entirely sure if that means on the battlefield or if it goes to the grave, because I haven't actually, at this exact moment, collected a pair yet. Just a second. What? No, I'm good. Okay. Anyhow, as I was saying, I haven't actually gotten a proper pairing yet in my personal collection, so I haven't really thrown these out in combat yet myself. So I'm not entirely sure if that means whenever they separate back to the battlefield, or they separate both to the grave, or what. So, like, whenever you break apart a meld, what does that mean? So I'm still figuring that part out myself. I don't think it specifies. Meld 2 creatures together and win the game this turn. Okay, so this is a this turn type thing. But let's just see what it says here. 3 specific pairs. Yeah, as I said, there's like only 3 right now. Turning over to the back faces and combining into 1 creature. Melded creature can do everything another creature can. When it leaves the battlefield, it returns to being 2 separate cards. Again, it doesn't specify like the whole situation there. Now, one thing about it though is because it's another kind of flip side type thing where you have 2 sides. You can see like what they become when melded from either of the cards that have to meld, which is kind of an interesting way of putting it, because they both technically have that as their other side. It's just which one you choose to have face up out of that. Like if you're physically working the cards, you choose one of them to actually be face up representing the melded creature. So that's kind of how that part works. But again, we're on the electronic version with Magic Duels, so yeah. So let's go over what we have on the field here being presented and how they work. Like right now we have one called Midnight Scavengers in our hand. When Midnight Scavengers enters the battlefield, you may return target creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to your hand. Melds with Graph Rats. Now the thing is that's very important because it says exactly what the other card is you're looking for. And as for what it'll become and how it'll be important to this combat, let's flip. Chittering Host, an Eldrazi horror creature. It's a 5/6, so that's actually decently impressive. It has both haste and menace. Now this is what you call reminder text, reminding you what certain abilities do. It's saying this creature can't be blocked except by 2 or more creatures. I've mentioned menace before, but here's one situation where it comes up and there's no specific lesson about it, but it is in the skill quest. So it's just like this thing's just basically telling you. And that's another thing I'd like to always remind people. Read the card whenever you need to know what it does, because it will usually tell you, except in situations where it has too much text to have all the abilities fully listed. I've seen a few that had like 5 or 6 like normal abilities, kind of like haste and menace and stuff like that, and just piled in a row, and it honestly couldn't have space for reminder text. So it's just like you have to know the game for those situations. But it was just there's some really ridiculous cards with abilities like that. Or rather, I should say chains of them. Anyhow, when Chittering Host enters the battlefield, other creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain menace until end of turn. So basically, whenever this thing powers up into its new melded form, every other creature that you control will be powered up by 1 in terms of its power and gain the same ability that it has, menace, until end of turn, which means none of your creatures can be blocked by just one creature for that turn. Now we have a Shambling Ghoul on the field. They're kind of meh because they enter the battlefield tapped, so I mean it's like eh. But the big thing is playing this card, and as from what my opponent has, they have a Paladin, so they have a Noble Knight that I'm about to slide right around and smack the enemy right past, so this Noble Knight will have no idea what's coming on. Lifelink is always nice, but sorry, that's not this lesson. But anyhow, let's see, Graveyard. Do I have the Graph Rats? I do have the Graph Rats. It's at the beginning of combat on your turn. If you both own and control Graph Rats and a creature named Midnight Scavengers, exile them, then meld them into Chittering Host. So yeah, this is the one that I'll be melding with, and it qualifies under the rule of the other one, which is basically whenever it comes into play into the battlefield, you can return another small creature to your hand. Now the thing is, whenever it goes with another quick statement here, whenever it goes to converted mana costs, that means the absolute sum total of all points of mana you need to cast something. Like for example, this one is 4 generic and 1 black, so its converted mana cost would be 5. Because you add that up after you just convert it all into like generic points. The Shambling Ghouls are basically 2 because they're 1 and 1 black. Graph Rats are 1 and 1 black, so they're also converted mana cost of 2, and I get to get something back to 3 or less. So that means the Graph Rats will be back. Now I have enough mana to cast this, and because Graph Rats is only 2 more points, I will be able to cast both of them after I get the Graph Rats back. So zip. Of course, that's what this whole lesson's about, is getting your rats back. Yep, thanks for pulling out of my grave. So I'll be getting you right out of there. Okay, so because I had nothing else that could be done, it goes to attack. The attack phase, which is considered the beginning of combat whenever that starts up. And now I have that here. Now, why does it not have Summoning Sickness? Again, because haste. Haste means no Summoning Sickness. It can attack right now. And so that means basically whenever it comes onto the field, it and all creatures will be decently strong because it's a 5/6, and it just powered these up by 1 point each in power, and they have menace. So none of this stuff will be blockable by that one creature. So this, and also should be noted, because they powered up, you got to consider the new numbers. They're now 3/3 creatures, and this is a 5/6. So 3, 6, 11. That's exactly enough points to take out the enemy. Which, again, in these little training exercises the game has, happens quite a bit. So you can tell the solution here is attack with all. Let's just throw everything at them. That's one thing, is that the skill quests tend to simplify combat, because you don't always want to do that. But here in the skill quest, that is actually used. Darn lips, I'm talking way too fast. In these skill quests, that is usually your answer. Is strike with everything. And yeah, this is mentioning about looking for the 2 other Meld creatures, because that one was one of the examples, but it is one that you could actually collect in game. And so if you're like getting like booster packs and stuff in the game later, you can actually get those. Now the thing is that it mentions that there's 2 other pairs, and that I mentioned that before. The other 2 start off non-legendary from the things that you merge, and they wind up as legendary. Well, actually, that just not entirely fair. One of them is 2 non-legendary things that becomes legendary. One of them is 2 legends that become a bigger legend. And this is the one that very specifically. Brizella, Voice of Nightmares, you have to have 2 legendary creatures meld to become Brizella. And then you have 1 whopper of a legend. So, yeah, she is terrifying. And I could see if I eventually get that, I will be running some enemies over with her, because she's just an absolute monstrosity. Now, let me see, where was the other one? Emerge. Another aspect of this return to Innistrad, and the fact that the Eldrazi are invading, and they represent these cosmic evils, so to speak, or cosmic horrors. And the thing is that part of cosmic horror is kind of what you call body horror, and where you get weird transformations and mutations and things emerging out of things, kind of like on the Alien series and stuff like that. So this is where it gets, in terms of concept, a bit gruesome. So yeah, because the Eldrazi are kind of hosting themselves into other creatures, using them as living gateways to emerge into the world. And with Emerge, they literally pop out of another creature. You can have these particular Eldrazi summoned normally without doing that, but they have a special Emerge cost. If you do that, you can reduce their overall casting cost and put them onto the field by sacrificing another creature to do it. That means they've literally popped out of that creature and come onto the field that way. Which, if that happened in actuality, that would be kind of a very, very startling thing. I mean, somebody would probably be terrified and stunned just witnessing that. So you could also use this as a terror tactic, especially when it shows you're willing to sacrifice creatures to get these things out. So yeah. Now, the thing is, a lot of Eldrazi are completely colorless, but they're not artifact creatures. They are truly colorless. Like they're just a colorless creature. Now, if any of their abilities calls for other colorless creatures, you can count artifact creatures among them, but the Eldrazi themselves are usually colorless. There are some that have casting costs that include colors, but then have something called Devoid that says that they're not really colored. I guess you could say that you're using colored mana to tempt them out. So you're calling them, you're tempting them with their favorite food, basically. But for those that are really colorless, they just don't care. Now, you could tempt them out with a particular type of creature. In this case, Emerge means you're using the creature either as something to erupt from, or you're using them for bait. Either way, that doesn't sound friendly. So, yeah. And they will be... And part of this, mechanically, is that overall casting cost is reduced by the cost of the creature that you sacrifice, but only starting from a special cost, which is usually lower than the overall mana cost for the Eldrazi that you're doing this with. For example, this Wretched Grift has a casting cost of 7. That's just 7 generic, that's straight up. But if you use Emerge, that's 5 and 1 blue, which means 5 generic, 1 blue. But that's further reduced by the actual mana cost of the creature that you sacrifice. So for example, if you sacrificed a creature that was otherwise 5 and 1 blue as its actual casting cost, this would basically be free. Like, you would literally have a free creature out if you had something else that big. And that would be, well, at the cost of sacrificing the creature that you emerged it from. So that's, again, a special tactic. Now, otherwise you will reduce the cost overall. Like, you have to pay 1 blue in one way or another to do this. So whenever you do Emerge this way, it will probably involve using a blue creature. So yeah, either that or a combination of paying blue yourself plus paying the the generic mana cost of the creature that you've sacrificed by sacrificing it. I mean, you won't be paying that there because you're sacking the creature to reduce that cost. Again, mechanically, this is a lot easier explained whenever you actually go through this skill quest. So yeah, this is one of those things that is really good to just do the quest and you're going, oh yeah, okay. See, then you're getting it. So again, this whole thing about the return to Innistrad is about basically cosmic horror type principles. So yeah. Yep, sorry. Bump that. And you do... the thing is that, again, this is pretty well represented in game. So yeah, as I was trying to say, you can kind of discount it by doing things. And this is another way of showing it. The math here is saying that if you're It's only. Oh, sorry. Forgot to mention it's actually more that it's reducing it only by the generic mana cost after being converted into converted mana cost. So, like this example here has a creature that has 1 and 1 blue, and that's a converted mana cost of 2. And so, using the emerge cost here is 5 and 1 blue, so you subtract 2 generic from it from the creature sacrificed, and you get 3 and 1 blue overall that you'd have to pay after that. So that's how you get that discount. Again, let's see this more in the actual gameplay, because that'll be a lot easier. Win the game this turn. Well, that's straightforward. Okay. Decimator of the Provinces. Yeah, this thing is a monstrosity. Let's see what we got on the field. We have Elvish Visionary. So that 1 and 1 green would be a discount of 2. This would be a discount of 3. Because it has 2 and 1 green, so converted that's 3. How many do I have to... This one has a whopping payment of 10. Yeah, a 6 and 3 green. Yeah, that's impressive. Yeah. This one I actually have a copy of in game, and it is massive. Now it has trample and haste, and other creatures you control get +2/+2 and gain trample until end of turn. So as soon as this end, it's 7/7. So this thing comes out, your enemy is going to be in serious pain. I could cast this, but I don't think I'd be able to afford the whole thing, because I need to sack a very specific creature to get this to even work. Because that's... can I even do that, though? Because this is 6 and 3 green. I'm only going to get a discount of 3 from this one. And then that would be 3 and 3 green. So yeah, that's just enough if I sacrifice this creature. Now, special note, whenever you see a card in your hand that's surrounded by a blue aura rather than a red aura, that doesn't just mean it's playable. And again, this goes to gameplay in the electronic version. Obviously, this does not happen with physical cards, but that means something extra special can be done when casting it. Or not exactly casting it, but doing something else that's related to the whole overall situation. Like in this case, it means you can use a special ability that's different than the normal way of casting it. This is saying that you can use Emerge right now. Some other things may have a special ability called Cycling you can do, where you can afford to discard the card and draw a new one. And that ability, if you have it, can be played at any time. But this is summoning, so this is main phase only. So again, summoning feature. And there's other times where it means that not only can it be played, but means you can have a powered up effect. Like for example, this kind of glow also happens with some things that have either an ability called Surge, which means you have a reduced casting cost, or maybe with abilities like Rally and Revolt, where you can do something extra special with them just because some other condition has been met. So again, this means special version of casting rather than normal version. So if you see a blue aura, that means it's hinting that you could do something that's a bit trickier than normal. So let's go with doing this full process and letting this gigantic Eldrazi boar out to play. Now, obviously, I can't even afford this. Again, red borders usually mean playable, and that also goes for things like this. Like right now, it's saying your alternative thing to do, or alternative cost, means use Emerge, because it has pay 10, which is a huge casting cost anyhow, grayed out. To do that normally without doing Emerge, you'd probably need to have a lot of mana sources, including possibly some alternative ones to regular land, like things that can give you additional mana in your mana pool. So you're probably not going to be able to pay 10 normally anyhow. Now, in this case, I'm going to be able to use up everything I got to use Emerge. So this Eldrazi boar is just going to pop right out of this wind and blow everything away. So, sorry about the sacrifice, but this is going to go absolutely nuts in a second. Okay, now this creature over here is tapped out, so they're not going to do anything. So that means that's going to be 10 points of raw damage, because this one's a 3/3 right now because of the power up, and this one's already a 7/7. and that adds up to 10 points, which is what my enemy has. And again, this is one of the situations where, because the skill quest, you tend to have exactly what you need. So this is another time where, as I said, in the skill quest, it tends to go down to attack roll. So goodbye, and yeah, you're gonna get just trampled. Swirly. That was kind of viney. Okay, now this is another special reminder that there's certain situations where, again, read it on the card. This is saying that Emerge works well with very particular situations, because there's certain creatures that whenever they're sacrificed, not necessarily just for Emerge, but whenever they're sacrificed specifically in general is how they die, they give you some sort of special bonus. And that's something that also plays off in this Return to Innistrad, is a block. What I mean by that has to do with some other things I might go over another time. But basically, if you sacrifice a creature and you're using a merge, then the two effects can resonate to produce a much bigger effect. So this reminder says, look for anything that works well together, basically. And that's something to do in general, but it's just kind of a specific case here saying, hey, you can sacrifice a creature to get power out of that, and get it sacrificed for this at the same time. Yeah. And that'll be it for now out of these, because I'm going through these at a pretty good clip. But when it comes down to it, there's only certain things I can really go over at a time, especially when things are kind of appropriately clustered, I guess you could say. And there's a lot of these to go over, so I'm trying to do this whenever I have a grouping that I can think of. And that's basically it for that area, because, I mean, it was all from the same block, basically. And although, again, Transform has shown up in other blocks before and after, it was just kind of appropriate to do it with the Return to Innistrad from the Eldrazi Invasion Saga, because it was very appropriate to how things played. Again, cosmic horror theme equals crazy monster transformations like that, so yeah. Again, this has been Glitch Reaper. I'll be logging off for now. Hope to hear from y'all later, and bye for now, everybody.